The day my grandfather calmly pushed a $50,000 BMW into a Wyoming creek did not begin with anger or shouting or threats. It began with silence, the kind of silence you only hear on private land where the horizon stretches far enough to remind you that boundaries matter, where fences are respected not because of signs, but because of understanding, and where anyone who ignores that fact usually learns very quickly that they have stepped into the wrong place. I was standing near the barn on our family ranch just outside Redstone Basin, Wyoming, scanning the pasture the way I always do out of habit rather than fear, a habit I carried home with me after leaving the military. When something felt off, not loud or dramatic, just wrong in a quiet way, because parked in the middle of our grazing land, tires pressed into grass that had no business hosting strangers, sat a white BMW that absolutely did not belong there. No dust cloud. No hesitation, no attempt to stop at the gate or call ahead. Just a luxury vehicle sitting where cattle usually moved. And in that moment, every instinct I had sharpened over years of service kicked in. Because people who wander onto private land with confidence instead of caution usually believe they have authority they do not actually possess. I hadn't even reached the fence line when I saw her step out of the car, clipboard in hand, wearing a white blouse styled to resemble a lab coat just enough to fool someone who wanted to be fooled, cheap handheld meters dangling from her wrist, posture rehearsed, expression serious, and before she could say a word, I already knew she wasn't lost. Her name, as she would later introduce herself, was Vivian Ashford, and she claimed to represent something called the Pure Living Collective, a name vague enough to sound official but empty enough to mean nothing. And as she walked toward the house without permission, scanning soil, air, and water like an actor performing science rather than practicing it, she began explaining, without being asked, that she was conducting an environmental wellness assessment due to reported concerns of contamination. That was the first red flag, because no real agency starts with fear, they start with paperwork. She spoke in half-terms and borrowed language, toxins, heavy metals, endocrine disruption, phrases lifted from headlines rather than textbooks, and she emphasized health, children, long-term exposure, the kind of language designed not to inform but to unsettle, and for a brief moment I considered cutting her off immediately, escorting her off the property, calling the sheriff, ending it right there. Then my grandfather stepped out onto the porch. Walter, Pops called her, 81 years old, slow in movement but sharp in every way that counts, took one look at the car, one look at the woman, and one look at the equipment, and I watched his eyes narrow in that familiar way that meant he smelled something rotten long before anyone else did. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, didn't posture. He simply asked her who sent her. She launched into her script again, repeating the name, repeating the concern, repeating the authority she did not actually have, and Pops waited patiently, letting her finish, before calmly pointing out something that would later become famous around town, that the real EPA doesn't drive luxury sedans onto private ranches, that federal inspectors don't use equipment you can buy online for $99, and that official paperwork doesn't misuse basic scientific terminology. For the first time, Vivian Ashford hesitated. She adjusted her grip on the clipboard, smiled tightly, said she would return with formal documentation, and retreated to her BMW, not defeated, just delayed. And as she drove off, Pops turned to me and said something that would echo through the rest of this story. She'll be back, and next time she'll be bolder. She left more behind than tire tracks. On the ground near where she had been standing were several glossy brochures, professionally printed, filled with alarming charts, bold red warning symbols, and promises of detoxification, remediation, and proprietary treatment plans, each one priced far beyond what any normal family could comfortably afford. And as I flipped through them, the pattern became obvious. This wasn't science. This was fear for sale. The model was simple: scare people with the idea that their land, water, or children were in danger, then offer an exclusive solution only they could provide, a solution urgent enough to discourage second opinions, expensive enough to feel serious, and vague enough to avoid verification. That night, I started digging. The Pure Living Collective website was polished but hollow, testimonials stock photo thin, credentials impossible to verify, addresses leading to virtual offices, phone numbers routing through call centers, and the deeper I went, the clearer it became that this wasn't a local scam. It was part of something larger, something mobile, something designed to move quickly through rural communities where trust runs high and resources are spread thin. I reached out to Dr. Samuel Wright, a local physician who had been serving ranch families in the area for decades, and when I showed him the materials, his reaction was immediate and unmistakable. "This is not just fake," he said. "It's manipulative. It preys on anxiety, especially parental anxiety, and it can cause real harm even without touching anyone." The harm became real very quickly. Within days, neighbors began talking. Isabella Moore, a single mother living just outside town, admitted that Vivian had visited her property too, warning her that her daughter showed early markers of exposure, urging immediate intervention, pushing an $8,000 detox package, and only backing off when Isabella said she needed time. Another family reported similar visits, similar language, similar pressure, and then things escalated when Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman living alone, was rushed to the hospital after suffering a panic episode triggered by being told her well water was poisoned. Fear, once released, doesn't stay contained. We knew then that waiting was no longer an option. With Dr. Wright's guidance, we designed a test, not to trick science, but to expose lies. We placed harmless substances, distilled water, food-grade salt, vanilla extract, in marked locations around the ranch, documented everything, installed discreet cameras, and waited. When Vivian Ashford returned, she wasn't alone. She arrived with a man introduced as a technical specialist, both of them moving with confidence, both of them repeating the same alarming conclusions, claiming severe contamination, elevated risk, urgent danger, and then, without pause, offering a comprehensive remediation package priced at $8,000, payable immediately. Every reading was false. Every conclusion was fabricated. Every word was captured on camera. That was when Dr. Wright finally told us the part he had been holding back. He wasn't just a local doctor. He was cooperating with federal investigators. For months, agencies had been tracking a multi-state wellness fraud network targeting rural communities, elderly residents, and families with young children, and Vivian Ashford was already on a list, but evidence was hard to gather because the network moved fast and operated on intimidation. What they needed was documentation. What they didn't expect was Wyoming. When Vivian came back again, she made the mistake of believing she still controlled the situation. She parked her BMW on our land without permission, again, stepped out with renewed arrogance, and before anyone could stop him, Pops climbed into his John Deere tractor, eased it forward, hooked the BMW carefully, and with the same calm he used to fix fences and mend gates, pushed it slowly, deliberately, into the shallow creek that cut through our property. He later explained it simply. "Illegally parked vehicle," he said. "I relocated it." The community showed up in minutes. Phones out, whispers spreading, tension thick, Vivian screaming about lawsuits and damages, threatening everyone in sight, completely unraveling in front of witnesses. And that was when Dr. Wright stepped in, calmly informing her that impersonating government agencies, committing consumer fraud, and targeting elderly residents carried serious federal consequences. She didn't stop. Instead, she escalated, calling in supposed emergency teams, spreading rumors of imminent danger, pushing even more expensive packages, even targeting families with newborns, crossing the one line that cannot be uncrossed. That night, we made the call. The next day, under the guise of a community emergency intervention, families gathered, recording devices active, conversations documented, and the moment Vivian Ashford began pitching her final urgent solution, federal agents moved in. FBI, CDC, badges real, authority undeniable. She was arrested along with her associates, charged with conspiracy fraud, impersonation of federal agencies, elder abuse, and consumer protection violations, and as she was led away, the fear she had sold so freely evaporated into stunned silence. In the aftermath, the network collapsed, victims received restitution, and our community did something even more important. We learned, together, how to recognize manipulation, how to verify authority, how to protect one another. Pops became a local legend. The creek still runs. A small sign now stands nearby, half serious, half poetic, reading, "Contaminated by fraudulent claims, cleansed by common sense." And if there is one thing I learned from watching a man in his 80s calmly do what federal agencies could not do alone, it is this. Scams thrive in isolation. Truth thrives in community. Sometimes justice needs the law. Sometimes it needs a tractor. And sometimes it needs both. So I'll leave you with this. If a stranger walked onto your land with official-looking papers and confident words, would you question them or trust the performance? Are wellness scams more dangerous than financial scams because they attack fear instead of wallets? And when it comes to justice, do you believe in strict legal procedure or the kind of Wyoming justice that begins with boundaries and ends with accountability? If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to the LULU Stories channel to hear more real, intense, and justice-driven stories just like this one.